Hello, everybody. We have Julie Menanno with us. She is a couples therapist. I'd like to hear her story. She has a new book out we'll be talking about. And we are here today to discuss the four types of attachment style. Julie, thank you very much for being here. I'd like to hear a little about your story. How did you get into couples therapy or the marriage counseling? How did this all come about? Where did the idea come from?
Sure. Well, I started this journey when I really wanted to be a better parent. And I grew up in a home where, things weren't quite perfect. My parents loved me and did the best they could, but a lot of lack of emotional support there. And I really set out kind of early in life to have a big family because I think that that's what I was that was my way in my little mind of healing myself, was to surround myself with this happy family that I didn't feel like I had growing up. And so I ended up having my first two children, and I realized, wow, I don't know what I'm doing. I thought, if you just put in the right ingredients and they go to the right school and you feed them the right food and dress them in the right way, everything kind of works out. But there's something really missing from that equation, and I just didn't know how to sort of balance loving them with kind of giving them, parameters in life, and just felt really overwhelmed. So I started reading every parenting book I could get my hands on, a lot of contradictory information. And in the process, I'm trying to kind of heal myself and my own old wounds. And it didn't have a lot to do with my relationship with my husband. We were kind of skating along. And then I had my sixth child, and I thought, okay, I've got to get some space from this. It was too intense for one person, I think, to handle. I didn't have an extended family network around. And so I decided to go back to grad school and I thought, well, these books aren't really getting it for me. So I need to just go to the source and learn psychology. So I went back, and with the idea that never in a million years did I want to be a couples therapist. I just had really less than zero interest. And uh, so anyway, got the degree, was working with individuals, discovered attachment theory pretty early on. Everything made sense about it to me. It was just all the pieces sort of fit together. And then I had to start seeing some couples to get my license. And first couple I saw, I thought, wow, this is incredibly difficult, which I love challenge. And I thought, I have to see a certain number of couples. I need to know what I'm doing. Immediately signed up to go do uh, the introductory training of the type of work I do, which is emotionally focused therapy for couples. Absolutely fell in love, and I have not taken on an individual as a new client since that day, which was, 10, at least 10 years ago. And absolutely fell in love. What I love about it, I think if I were to just condense it, is to be a good therapist, to do the therapy, you have to have a strong alliance with the client. You have to have, validation and trust and all these emotional safety and these emotional support skills. And that's not the therapy, but it's the foundation that builds, the trust and the ability for someone to feel safe enough to start self-reflecting. And I was finding that I'm building these great relationships with my clients, but then they're going home and they're learning all of these things, but they don't have these relationships at home. And so with couples work, I have the ability to not only create that alliance with each of the partners, but to transfer it to them. So they get to go home with this beautiful work, which just feels extremely fulfilling to me. The second reason is that I think we are our most authentic selves in the context of our closest relationships. So I felt like I was really able, by working with the relationship, to get to the deepest parts of my clients in a way that I wasn't able to get to just working individually. And then the third reason is just from, a purely selfish place. It's like so intellectually stimulating. And at the same time, you get to be this, emotional person that you want to be, this validating helpful presence, but there's so much intellect involved, like chess. You're working with two different individuals. You're working with the relationship as this third entity between the two of them. And it just, the sessions sort of fly by because they're just every part of your being is engaged in this process. So it's just very fulfilling work. I never don't look forward to a session.
Julie, the way you speak about your job, your career, the way you light up the room when you're speaking about it, I love to see the passion. And it's rewarding watching somebody such as yourself have so much passion for their career. Many of
Uh,
us go through life, we're just doing the job, the job, but not really passionate about it anymore. So thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
I
I
have
do
to,
feel that passion. I pinch myself every day, like, oh, this is my job. I get to, wow, you know.
I do have to clarify. Did you say 6 children?
I have 6 children. Yes.
And then you said you went back to school after having the sixth child. Is that correct?
Yes. And we planned to have four, but we had twins. Four and five were twins. And then we had a little surprise at the end. And I'm not going to lie, it was really, really hard on me. When it gets to the point where you don't feel like you can care properly for each of them, that's when you start to kind of lose it.
I'm so glad you continued on and glad that you took the time and the effort and the energy to go back to school so that you could be passionate about your career.
Yes, me too. Everyone I know thought I was crazy, but I just I was like, no.
It paid off. You're a role model. Tell us how
Yeah.
you got into the attachment styles. So let's talk a little about the
Sure.
attachment styles.
Well, I started early on, and in grad school, I've kind of the first semester, we weren't learning attachment theory at all. It wasn't being taught in grad school at that time. And I think it's just now sort of starting to become standard curriculum. But I just found it. It started with this other type of theory called psychodynamic, which then sort of breaks off into object relations, and then it breaks down into attachment theory. And it's really understanding the person from the inside out. And attachment theory really puts the human in the context of the relational environment that they're born into. And everything just really made sense far more than anything else I was learning. All the other things I was learning make sense, but on the surface, like if you really just keep distilling, you have this baby born into an environment with a temperament, born into an environment, and that environment is just really going to shape how that individual experiences and manages relationships, throughout the life, if everything sort of stays the same on the same trajectory. I mean, we can all change and heal, and parents can grow and learn new things. There's always malleability to it, but it just made absolute sense. To me, attachment theory is the closest science has come to explaining the real nuances of the way relationships actually work. And so I really dove into just understanding everything I could about that while I had the opportunity in grad school. It was one of those things where I was kind of like quickly doing their work on the side and then learning my own stuff over here, and started practicing it immediately. And it's interesting because we hear about these 4 attachment styles, and they have become kind of a mainstay in the cultural conversation around self-help and relationships. But those are just sort of really simplified ways, and there's so much more to the theory that people, lay people don't know. And it's okay, because that's the starting point, and just those 4 styles can really help people make sense of themselves. But I just really, kind of, it feels important to me for people to know that this is so much more than, a quiz of what Harry Potter house do you live in. So
Let's talk about the
yeah,
four.
let's talk
Superficially
about it.
simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if
Simple.
they want to work with you, we'll provide that information, how
Uh,
they people can get.
Yeah. And to that point, I never, for years before attachment theory and styles became common knowledge, I never even told people what attachment style they were. I just worked with what was in front of me. So you do not need to know these exact terms. But with that said, it can be extraordinarily helpful to understand yourself through the lens of attachment. So someone with what we call an anxious attachment, they're typically born into homes where there's not a whole lot of emotional predictability. They don't know if they're going to be responded to if they show emotions, typically distressing emotions that are related to relationships. If they, show anger or jealousy or sadness or even sometimes joy, wanting to connect, they're not predictably responded to. They might get responded to sometimes. They might get shamed. They might get punished. They might get rejected. And so they know enough about how it feels to be responded to crave it and to keep that feeling kind of alive in them. And so they're kind of desperately looking for it, desperately looking for it. They might have to get big. They might have to cry. They might have to people please. But the point is they're actively seeking it. And then what happens is their nervous systems don't ever really get to trust it's real because they don't know that they can rely on it to come back later. And so they sometimes will get caught up in these testing behaviors, which is, are you going to be here for me now? Are you going to be here for me now? And that leads to just kind of this chronic sense of anxiety around relationships and hypervigilance. And that, if it continues, will start showing up in adult relationships and in kind of the same way, right? It's just constantly wanting to close that distance. We have to resolve problems right here and now because it creates too much anxiety for me to kind of leave things hanging. Some have a difficulty with physical separation. Some have, all anxious attachment folks are going to be very, very sensitive to emotional invalidation, being told your emotions aren't real, your emotions don't matter, you're being dramatic. I mean, that's a big one for anxious attachment. And there's always just this sense of like unease. Even when things are going well, it's hard to really sit with it and take it in. The way that they try to get these needs met very desperately, when it's coming from that anxious attachment place, it's just going to push their partner away. It just ends up pushing people away from them. A lot of times there's a flavor of blame, or you're not getting it right, or a lot of kind of protesting behaviors that don't involve really kind of speaking from yourself from this kind of place of vulnerability. Now, the problem is much of the time, those with anxious attachments are in relationships with someone with an avoidant attachment. And there are a lot of good reasons for that I won't go into. But the person with an avoidant attachment, they grow up in what we call an emotionally impoverished environment. That means that they really never get their emotional needs met to the degree that they just kind of disavow their attachment needs altogether, just kind of stuff them away, don't expect, try to get a sense of closeness in other ways, not rocking the boat, high achieving, just they don't have a direct sense of emotional fulfillment with that stuff, but they at least get to feel safe with others. They don't really ever learn to put words to feelings. They don't learn how the feelings kind of show up in their body. The feelings are definitely impacting them and moving them forward through life, but not in a conscious way at all. And so what happens when you don't know how to tend to your own emotions and fight for your own emotional needs to be met? You certainly don't know how to recognize them in others, and you don't know how to help others with their emotions. You don't know how to help yourself with your emotions, and you don't know how to take in help from others. All of this creates multiple blocks to intimacy on both sides. And then typically you're going to have someone with an avoidant attachment in a relationship with someone with an anxious attachment. So now the avoidant attachment can't really show up emotionally. And when they, their way of responding to the anxious partner's big emotions, as the relationship kind of moves forward and starts to have conflict, these things start to surface. So they're responding to the anxious partner with a lot of invalidation or appeasement, and they get in these cycles, and it just continues to go back and forth. They can't resolve problems together. They harm their closeness. They reinforce each other's attachment style. And so then you have this other category called disorganized attachment. So the way I like to describe that is you take a blender, you pour in some anxious attachment, you pour in some avoidant attachment, you sprinkle a bunch of trauma on top, and a lot of unpredictability, a lot of emotional chaos. Turn it on, blend it all together, and then pour it into a glass, and you have disorganized attachment. And then we have secure attachment, which is what we're all going for. That is kind of like, instead of the anxious partner who is just overwhelmed with their emotions, and instead of the avoidant partner who is completely cut off from their emotions, we have this balanced individual who has access to their emotions. They use their emotions to inform them how to navigate through life and relationships, but they're not overwhelmed. They have this, what I call, a balance of head and heart. And they're able to advocate for their needs. They're able to help themselves with their own emotions when needed. They're able to help their partners with their emotions. They're able to take in help and sit with goodness. And kind of, they're seeing relationships through the lens of more like what's in front of them, instead of all these scary messages from the past, and able to communicate, clearly, able to set healthy boundaries, and basically just aren't living in a constant state of fear that either my needs won't be met, or, I'm going to get it wrong no matter what I do, or if I show up with my emotions, that means I'm weak or flawed, or yeah.
I'd like to move on to Secure Love, what we're all
Yes.
hoping for. It's the name of your book.
Yes.
Secure Love, create a relationship that lasts a lifetime. Isn't that
Yeah.
what we all want?
Yes.
Where'd this idea come from?
Well, I really had a sense that the world was needing this information. In during COVID, long story short, I ended up on Instagram, and my mission was just, hey, I'm doing a lot of this great work with couples, but I can't see every couple in the world. No therapist can see every couple. So many people don't have access to couples therapy. So many people don't have access to this type of couples therapy. And so I just decided, kind of loosely, I'll just start educating people with what I know and see how much I can help people, through this social media platform. Started drawing cartoons to kind of explain. I definitely have a very nuanced understanding of all of these things because I work with it, because I'm using this with couples, and it gives me this unique window into the way these things show up in these very, very nuanced ways that a lot of people will read, and they'll think, wow, I never even considered that, and started teaching people. Not, it was really important to me not to just say to people, hey, here's what's wrong, but hey, here's what you can do. And so that just kind of started out. People really latched onto that. They were loving it. And then I started getting requests for a book. In my mind, oh yeah, sure, I'll spend a month kind of, organizing what I know, kind of the trajectory, the path that I take couples on. It's a very structured path, and just kind of put that in a book format. And how hard can that be? And a month in, I thought, this is way more than I could have time for. And I remember I went out onto our front porch. My husband was out there, doing something. He's always tinkering around. And I said, I don't know what I was thinking. There is no way I can write a book. I mean, this is crazy. And he was like, no, you have to write the book. You have to, like, you need to write this book, which he's always trying to pull me back. So the fact that he was wanting me to do this, it just, that was it. To
Validate.
hear him say, yeah, that was it. And so what I thought would be a month, and then what I thought would be a few months, and then what I thought would be a year, turned into 3.5 months. 3.5 years, because I just needed to get it right. And So what it is it's kind of throwing attachment theory out there, like in a very descriptive way. Like this is a very detailed account of the childhood that creates these styles. This is a very detailed account of how it's going to show up in your adulthood in your relationship. Okay, now we have that information on board. Now we're going to talk about how it all comes together in your relationship and drives these negative cycles, these negative communication cycles that are extremely patterned. The pattern is typically very consistent from couple to couple. I'm sorry, from topic to topic. Every couple has their sensitive topics. You're typically going to see the same pattern of fighting, no matter what the topic is. Some couples might have two versions of it. But then when you look at, couples on a whole, even couple to couple, you're going to see these repetitive pattern. So that's what makes my job easier, is because I'm kind of seeing the same thing over and over, which is these negative cycles. And it's all fueled by this attachment insecurity that we bring to the table. And then the attachment insecurity that we create together as two partners, and all the wounds that we build up. And so I'm going to put that out there and describe that in great detail. I've got charts. I've got, what I have found, I have actually had people come into my office and I have mapped their negative cycle out for them. I'll say, okay, give me, a scenario. If I'm a fly on the wall and you have a fight, and I'm going to map out and say, okay, here's what you were saying. Here's all the stuff that was going on underneath the surface that you're just not aware of. And they'll take a picture of it, because I used to have this big eraser board, and they'll say, okay, we're done. And they'll never come back. Because the cycle is so illuminating to them. It's like, wow, now everything makes sense. If they don't come back, they're probably going to find themselves stuck. But still, that's how, making the point that that's how just one glimpse of your negative cycle can bring it all together. And you can go, oh my God, this isn't these big chaos, disorganized fights where we go down in all these tangents. It's actually this really organized entity that we can get a grip on. So that's the next few chapters, which is, how do we interrupt this once it gets going? How do we prevent it to begin with by just creating this very kind of secure, attachment friendly environment? And then how do we repair it? Because they're going to happen. And then we have these couples that they've had so many horrible wounds built up between them, affairs or other just major breaches of trust, that they're having a hard time putting all this work into place because we have all these resentments and wounds built up. So now I'm going to say, if you're in this category, here's what you need to be doing to kind of start healing this stuff so that you can go forward and do the more, rudimentary relationship work. Then we go into just attachment how attachment relates to extenuating circumstances, trauma, sex, mental illness. And then last chapter, which everybody's really loving, is scripts. It's just you bring up a concern to your partner. They take it as a criticism. What can you say? Your partner's doing something to annoy you. What can you say? How do you bring up the topic of couples therapy to your partner if they're resistant? And it's just, dozens of just examples where people just, they get the concepts, but they just don't have the words. And so I'm just here to say, hey, here's some ideas to help you along while you're learning to communicate more effectively, because so many people did not grow up learning those words. And
Julie,
that's that. That's secure love.
I love it. I love the idea. Thank your husband for going ahead to push you along. So happy that you did this. Remember, everybody out there who's listening, name of the book is Secure Love, Create a Relationship That Lasts a Lifetime. Speaking to Julie Menanno. Julie, if people want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
.com is my website. I have at the Secure Relationship, which is on Instagram. Be sure to look for the blue check. They are imposters. And and I have a clinic that I have many, therapists working for me who do the same type of work. And I do workshops. I'm trying my best to just get this out, on as many layers as possible with my couples I work with and Wigger workshops, the book, and then, of course, all of the information is there on Instagram for free. I have nothing hidden behind paywalls. It's all there. It's just not, in as need of a package and organized. So,
Not organized, that's for sure.
yeah.
If you guys like this, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone else who needs to benefit from this. And we all know someone that is out there and can benefit from this talk. And we'll see you guys next week. Julie, thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.